The best way to learn a language? Immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. For instance, I've been using Babbel's convenient courses to help me learn basic conversational skills in German while I'm getting ready for a little trip I'm planning. It's not a language I'd ever studied before, but I find the lessons really easy and kind of like hand-holding me through learning a completely new language to me. And it's reassuring to know that with the help of Babbel, I'll be able to greet people, order food, and ask for directions without having to consult language apps while I'm in Deutschland. I'm still learning. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/vulgar. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/vulgar, spelled BABBEL.com/vulgar. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Contained herein are the heresies of Radolf Buntwine, erstwhile monk turned traveling medical investigator. Join me as I study the secrets of the divine plagues and uncover the blasphemous truth that ours is not a loving God, and we are not its favored children. The Heresies of Radolf Buntwine, wherever podcasts are available.
Hello, everybody. This is Trevor, host of the History of Persia. I'm telling the stories of the empires that dominated the Middle East from the fall of the Assyrians until the rise of Islam. I'll cover topics like the 300 Spartans, the origins of endurance racing, the losing side of Alexander the Great's conquests, and at least one evil priest who replaced and impersonated the king. If those stories and the stories and cultures of Greece and Rome's greatest enemies sound interesting to you, come check out The History of Persia, wherever it is you find your favorite podcasts, like this one.
Okay, so I have a guest here with me today. It is, back by popular demand, it's Allison Epstein.
Hello, I love being demanded. It's the greatest feeling in the world.
This is sort of like, there is, everybody loves hearing you and Lana when you guest on this show. They demand to hear you back, but also for both of you, I'm going to pick like specific stories where I feel like you're most suited. And for you, it is dirtbag adjacent.
This setup is really working great for me because Lana has to come in with Habsburg facts, and I get to come in when Anne reads a story and she goes, "Ooh, this person sucks." So yeah, I'm looking forward to this very much.
Well, no, exactly. Yeah, Lana is my Habsburg expert. And then you're here for just kind of, dirtbagginess. So, God, okay. I've been doing research. We're talking about Lola Montez, who is a person who I'm going to call Lola Montez throughout because that was a name she gave herself. And we respect that, despite the cultural appropriation nature of that name. That is the name she went by, and that's the name she's known by. There is, in contrast to, I want to say almost every person I've ever done on this podcast, like I usually do, I'm not doing like your Elizabeth I. I'm not doing Marie Antoinette. Like there's so much information about them. I tend to choose people that I need to dig around a bit more for facts. But Lola Montez, there's an overabundance of facts. There's so many interesting things. I was like, oh, I need to include that. I need to include that. I was going over my notes yesterday. I was like, oh, and I was like halfway through this biography and I'm like, no, my notes are so long. Like I can't, this is not like a 15-part mini series. So we're going to do like a highlights edition. Lola Montez highlights.
For the listeners' benefit, throughout the past 2 or 3 weeks, Anne has been sending me messages that literally just say, I can't wait to tell you about this, but I'm not going to tell you about it yet. So I've gotten like 3 facts out of context. I've done no prep. I'm coming in with nothing. I've been expecting to be delighted by the story.
I've also sent you several pictures.
You have. And I look forward to those making any sense at all because they do not right now.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm excited to do this podcast on this topic. So first, I'll just for you, for the listeners, how on earth did I find this person? So when I was researching Empress Cece, the first thing I listened to was Stuff You Missed in History Class podcast about Empress Cece. I just wanted to get they're really good for facts. I recommend that podcast. They do sort of very brief, which is good for me, just to get an overall idea so I can turn into a 5-hour extravaganza. Anyway, and in that, they mentioned we already did a podcast about Ludwig II of Bavaria, the one who did the castles.
One with the board game?
Yes, the board game. Quote unquote, Mad King Ludwig. So I was like, you know what? I want to learn more about him because he was friends with Cece. So then I listened to their episode about Ludwig and they were like, oh, you know what? There's this person called Lola Montez. She's a trip. Anyway. And I was like, who's this? So then I looked her up on Wikipedia. I was like, oh my God, this is what is happening? And then I looked back and they in fact did later on an episode, Stuff You Missed in History Class has been on for, 15 years.
Yeah.
So they did in fact do an episode on Lola Montez, which I listened to. And there was one fact in that where I was just like, not only do I need to do this on Vulgar History, but also I need to have Allison here. Yes. When we get to that fact, I will tell you that fact. But anyway, so it was a journey learning about Lola. And then it turns out, so like Catalina de Arauzo, and there are going to be similarities, she did write her autobiography.
We love an autobiographical queen. God bless.
Her autobiography is written, fascinatingly, in the third person.
Yes, it is. I love her already.
She would say, I also love her, which is me. Okay. So
she loves herself.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we've on Vulgar History, I've really not fallen into, but we've spent a lot of time in our international season in Western Europe. And I've been making a conscious effort to rewrite that a bit and get into other non-European countries. But Lola Montez, first of all, she goes to countries we've never talked about on this podcast before. She lived an international life and I can't not do it. This is the season that will never end, but I just keep finding stories that I can't. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll do this in 6 months? No, I have to do it now. So Lola Montez, there's a podcast I just found. I think it's called the Irish History Podcast. And
wait. Yeah. Lola Montez is Irish?
Okay. Hold on. That's where we're starting.
Okay.
And I will say that the Irish people do seem to have claimed her. So she was born there. Her mother was Irish. We're going to talk about her parents. But so in terms of she's truly a citizen of the world. But she was born in Ireland, and it does seem like the Irish are she is our scandalous 19th century heroine, we the Irish, even though she was born there, and that's about her entire connection to Ireland. So, honestly, wait. So I have this biography. It's part of my stack. I have the microphone on, but whatever. This biography written by Bruce Seymour, Lola Montez, A Life, which I found more helpful than Lola's own autobiography because her own autobiography is largely lies that can be proven to be lies because she lived in the late 19th century and there was a lot of people around then and we have a lot of their records. So we kind of know what actually happened. So his book, Bruce Seymour's book, kind of goes through well, she says this, but probably this. Anyway, the first 2 chapters are just about her parents. And I have to say her parents, also an interesting story. So I'm going to start off with the parents as well, but I'll try to not get too sidetracked. I know we both have a hard exit time for this conversation.
This cannot be a 16-part super special.
No. So I'm going to tell you about the parents, but I'll try to be as brief as I can while still telling you all the juicy bits. So her father was an Englishman named Ensign Edward Gilbert, who was in Ireland, because I'm not going to get into like the history of like military colonial occupation, but there's a lot of that going on here. This is an era where England was just kind of everywhere, including in Ireland. This is 1818 for the record. So like we're in the like Regency era. So her father, Ensign Edward Gilbert, was a British man or English man. I'm going to have to be so careful because the story, there's like England, there's Scotland, there's Ireland. And like at what point were which parts of those colonized by England?
It's all very spicy and contentious.
So like shout out to the Irish Tits Out Brigade members. I hope I don't accidentally say something incorrect about your country. Or Scotland. England, I feel like they're cool with me.
I feel like we can offend England at this point.
here's the thing. Yeah. So it's 1818. Ensign Edward Gilbert was handsome with a boyish face with light blonde side whiskers and a thin mustache. He had a cheerful and engaging personality, and he arrived in County Cork in Ireland to keep down rebellion in King George's Irish domain. So the king at this point is George III, which is the one who lost the American Revolution / the one from Hamilton.
The one from Hamilton, yes.
Yeah. The madness of King George is the king, but the actual power behind the throne is George IV, who is the horrible husband of Caroline of Brunswick. Anyway, so he's 26 years old, Ensign Edward Gilbert. And now this is like 1818, so it's a very like Wickham / Lydia scenario. Because we are in this Jane Austen era. So he caught the eye of 14-year-old Eliza.
No.
Eliza Oliver, a milliner's assistant. So Eliza was the illegitimate daughter of a former High Sheriff of Cork member of Parliament. So the Olivers were like pretty influential Irish family. She was the youngest illegitimate daughter of her father. So he had like a bunch of children with a woman he didn't marry. And then later he married another woman, but he was like cool to his illegitimate children. And she was one of them. And her name was Eliza. And they were planning to marry. So this is giving me Elvis Presley meets 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu in his real life type vibes. And just in the sense of an adult man meeting a 14-year-old. Anyway, so they were going to marry. Edward's regiment was moving out of Cork, which was normal because army regiments were often moved around because the soldiers would come to town and make friends, and that would stop them from suppressing the Irish people.
Colonialism humor.
Yeah, so they're moving around. So before they left, Edward and Eliza got married, and she followed him to where his army regiment was sent. 10 months later, she had a baby. So they did not get married because she was 14 and pregnant, but she was 15 and had a baby. And that child was named Elizabeth Rosanna Gilbert. And she would later rename herself Lola Montez. And we're just going to call her Lola Montez because if you have a vulgar history bingo card, this is a mother naming the daughter after herself moment. Because she's Eliza and she names her daughter also Eliza. Yeah, so I've noted here to the Irish Tits Out Brigade members, please note, Lola was born in Grange, a village near Sligo, near the ocean and beneath the imposing shadow of Ben Bulben Mountain. Which all sounds very Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit to me.
I would like to live under the opposing shadow of that. I think that sounds like the best place to be.
Ben Bulben Mountain. Later in life, Lola would claim she's born in Limerick, but she was not.
The most pointless lie. Like,
maybe she just didn't care or forgot. Anyway, so Edward got bored of serving in the, quote, discontented Irish hinterland, and he thought it would be more fun, there more opportunity to advance if he went to India, where British were being colonists. And so they headed to India via London. And Edward was so sweet. He, on the boat going to India, he had like all his watercolors with him. He's like, I'm going to paint all the beautiful things I see. And he had all these books to read. And he was just like, oh, I'm going to go to India and it's going to be great. But he caught cholera and died the instant they arrived there. So he's dead. Eliza is now 16 and a widow with a baby. And unless she remarried, not really much for her to do in colonial British India, especially not in Patna, the smallish remote area where Edward was supposed to have been assigned. Lola later described her mother as vain and self-centered, needing to be kept, which is wild for Lola Montez to be critiquing anyone as that. she said her mother needed to be kept busy and around people all the time. She was also 16.
Right. With a baby.
And a widow with a baby, like in colonial India. Anyway, because Edward, well, I guess because she had been well off and Edward was too. So like they had enough money. So okay. So we're going to get into sort of like this. You're familiar with The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson.
I was going to say, this is giving me Secret Garden vibes all the way.
Exactly. So Lola was mostly raised by Indian nursemaid, which they were called the Ayahs, which I know mostly because that's the name of a character in The Secret Garden, the musical, the Ayah. So she's being cared for by Indian nannies. And Lola was like, my mother abandoned me. She didn't care about me. But it's like, no, that's what everyone did. That's like, British mothers did not raise their children in England. Like,
right. Also, your mother was 16.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she wanted help. I would want help.
Yeah, exactly. So, allegedly, apparently because she was raised by these indulgent nannies, this allowed Lola to become spoiled and undisciplined. But I am going to come out saying, like, this is a demon seed issue. Like, Lola came out a monstrous person. And I don't think...
This is what would happen to the kid from The Secret Garden if she didn't go into the north of England and meet, like, a jerk boy who had the cholera or whatever. This is just like, if you just let her go.
Yeah, this is very Mary, what's her name from The Secret Garden. If she hadn't, met the, like, mean boy with, like, polio or whatever. And then the, like,
the weird child who can speak to squirrels.
Yeah, exactly. So she's just kind of like growing up spoiled and mean, but I feel like all the little girls were in British India at this time. Anyway, so Eliza was just like, I got to do something. And so she moved from Patna to Calcutta, which was at that point, a lot of British people were there. And Eliza quickly found a new husband. This is like, do you remember in Catalina de Arauzo at one point, we're just like, how many cousins is she going to run into? This is like, how many spontaneous husbands are Lola and her mother going to find? And it's a lot. So her new husband was Scottish. His name was Lieutenant Patrick Craigie. He was 24 years old. And she's like, 17 now. Like,
getting closer to 24. It's less weird.
I'm saying it's not great, but it's definitely less weird. So so she's 19 by now. She became Mrs. Patrick Craigie. He was off and away. Eliza left Lola with the Ayahs, who let her run wild, basically. Eventually, Patrick was like, we should like train Lola to be like non-feral and like, a human being who like wears shoes. So
the Ayahs are like, good luck with that. Your child sucks. We're not going to do that ourselves.
I've sent you pictures of her. So her as an adult has like really formidable eyebrows.
Yes.
So I'm just picturing a baby with those same eyebrows. Just like a 5-year-old who just has like this Frida Kahlo level brow.
Absolutely.
And anyway, so they arranged to send Lola to England to go to boarding school. She is 5 years old.
The entire country of India breathes a sigh of relief at this point.
Frankly, there's a point where an entire country does breathe a sigh of relief when she leaves. And it happens more than once. So anyway, they sent their 5-year-old. They're just like, bye. Like, so.
Yeah, that didn't connect to my brain when you said that the first time. She's 5.
Yeah.
It's not boarding school. You have her 5-year-olds.
Right. So her parents staying in Calcutta, the Ayahs who she raised her staying in Calcutta, and Lola is then age 5 in the care of a British couple she's never met to England. A 10-month journey, I believe. Anyway, so Lola later wrote, being sent over from India, which she loved, is where she first learned the life lesson that, quote, no one is truly free and the world is only a great prison.
Weird he didn't learn that in colonial India.
She's 5, so.
Yes.
She was just running around in the dirt, like no shoes on, just like she only knew freedom until this point. Not that the people of India knew freedom.
No.
Anyway, so age 5, she's sent away from her parents and the only place and people she'd ever known to go and terrorize England. So, it was 5 months at sea. So after 5 months at sea, she and her new guardians arrive in London, where she was then passed off from them to Scottish relatives of her stepfather, who are now going to care for her. So they went to Montrose, a small town between Dundee and Aberdeen. Shout out to the Scottish Tits Out Brigade. As per Lola's memoirs, which she wrote in the third person, quote, the arrival of the queer, wayward little East Indian girl was immediately known to all of Montrose. The peculiarity of her dress, and I dare not say a little eccentricity in her manners, served to make her an object of curiosity and remark, and very likely the child perceived the Jew somewhat of a public character, and may have begun, even at this early age, to assume airs and customs of her own. She is 5 years old, assuming airs of her own. But also, like, big Mary Lennox, the Secret Garden vibes. Everyone's just like, oh, who is this, like, mean, snippy, unusual girl?
Who is this worst child in the world?
Oh my God. Okay, so she was later. This is the thing. Like, this is, like, in terms of vulgar history, like, relatively recent, like the 1800s. Like, the letters people wrote have not decayed because they're from ancient papyrus. So Lola was later remembered by the people of Montrose for her pranks. For instance, when in church, when she got bored, she silently stuck flowers into the wig of the old gentleman sitting in a pew ahead of her. She also would, like, run around town naked, things like that. When she was 10, so she was there for 5 years, which I think I wrote somewhere is like, that's the longest she was ever in one place for the rest of her life. So her stepfather's older sister, so basically her aunt, her step-aunt, started a boarding school, and so she was just in Montrose being 5 to 10 years old. Then she went to boarding school and she became 10. Yeah. Okay. One of the teachers, oh my God, she started boarding school at Monkwearmouth. And one of the teachers at that school later described her thus, quote, "It was impossible to look at her for many minutes without feeling convinced she was made up of very wayward and troublesome elements. The violence and obstinacy, indeed, of her temper gave too frequent cause of painful anxiety to her good, kind aunt." He also described her as looking like, quote, "a little tigress just escaped from one den to another." So she's 10.
She's 10 and she sucks.
Yeah. So this is where I would say, like, if you could just think about the first picture I sent you, which is of this little angel-faced, big-eyed girl that looks like a little doll person. Like,
that's apparently not the vibes she gave off most of the time.
Artistic license. Yeah. So she stayed at this school for 1 year, not because she was kicked out, but because her stepfather had a fancy new rank. So her stepfather back in Calcutta. And so they wanted her to attend an even fancier school. So she went to a boarding school run by the Mrs. Eldridge in Bath. And I love the recurring appearance of Bath in episodes of this. That's where Mary Shelley and Claire Claremont were there for a while. Bath is where, when Mary of Modena was giving birth to Bunny Prince Charlie, that's where Queen Anne from The Favorite was like, I heard it was a changeling and she didn't really have a baby. Like, that was in Bath. Bath is just like where the gossip is happening. So a good vibes from Bath. Anyway, and there's also a boarding school there. So at this school, she did learn a lot of stuff. Like, she later was known for being very well spoken. She spoke French. She learned some French.
Honestly, that's everybody from, like, in my experience, who has spoken French. It's like, oh, they speak French. Well.
I mean, kind of. She also learned playing the piano, needlepoint dancing. She also learned, like, literature, art, philosophy. Like, she got a good education between just, doing hilarious pranks. And during her time there, she never tired of pulling pranks on teachers and saw herself as the chief agitator against adult authority. This is where I wrote in my notes, God, I love her. Oh, yeah. So this is another. So she was in Montrose for basically 5 years. She was in Bath for basically 5 years. And that's the longest she ever stayed anywhere for the rest of her life. One of the guardians during this era described her as a tortoise who buries her eggs lightly in the sand and leaves them to the sun and to chance.
What? What does that mean?
I think it means she's just like a random person who never thinks about consequences.
Okay, I guess. I'm really hung up on the turtleness of it all.
I don't know. I think a tigress is definitely a better descriptor. So when she was 15, going on 16, her mother came from India to see her daughter for the first time in 10 years. Her mother, who's now at 26 or whatever. And this is because she was 16. So it's like, because of, like, her mother was from this kind of good family. And then she married this guy who, like, rose up in the ranks. So, like, we're going to, like, find you a good marriage. They did not get along well for reasons you can imagine, knowing both of their personalities, which were, I would argue, the same personality. Eliza explained her plans to bring Lola back to India to marry a man who is aged 64, who, I didn't write it down, but Lola described him as, I forget, some sort of like consumptive nightmare or something.
It really does not matter what kind of person he was if he's 64 and
she's 15 going on 16.
15. Yeah. No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So enter a man named Lieutenant Thomas James. So he had, I think, sort of accompanied the mom from India. He was coming back to, I'm not sure if he's from Scotland or England, but he's coming back to the island, the British Isles, to convalesce from some sort of undetermined, probably malaria, right? That's what everybody gets in India. I mean, British people.
The British were not prepared for, yeah.
But he was like not really sick, but he was just kind of like, sick leave. So anyway, so the mom met him, and there was a thing about like, is he trying to seduce her? Is he the mom's lover? And then she trusted him to be the chaperone to Lola. And what happened is he pivoted to really liking Lola. So he was 29 years old. One of his jobs was escorting Lola between her lodgings and her academy. And she was just like, I don't want to marry a 64-year-old. Like, this is not for me. Giving her, like, as much as she is like the demon seed, she's also like been raised, she's been in boarding school, whatever. She does not know the ways of like men and women relationships, I would assume, based on what we know from Bridgerton about how much sex education, people get.
The highly accurate historical document,
Bridgerton, yeah. Anyway, so in her memoir, she said that she kind of was just like, she saw him as kind of like a fatherly figure. And they figured out like he could rescue her. Like he could rescue her from having to marry the 64-year-old if she married him, but she kind of didn't know what that meant. Anyway, so he's 29. She is 1 year older than her mother was when she eloped. And so they ran off together, and because she was a minor in a like Wickham Lydia energy, like he had to marry her because they ran off together. And so they had a secret sexy marriage, asterisk, as sexy as it can be when she is 15 and he's 29. The marriage was not what Lola had anticipated, although I don't know what she had anticipated. She later wrote, the child had sought only a protector, but she found a master. He brought her to his family's estate, Ballycrystal, which sounds, I'm going to say, I don't know. It sounds Irish, maybe. Anyway, I forget if he's Irish or Scottish or English, one of those. Probably not Irish. Anyway, if he was Irish, he was probably a British person in Ireland. He wasn't an Irish person. Lola realized that being the married teenage wife stuck in the Irish countryside was just as boring as boarding school. Like how her father was like, I don't like being in the British regiment in like the wilds of Ireland. Lola was like, I don't like being married to him here. She especially didn't like the endless ceremonial tea drinking.
Just a shame, because that sounds fun.
I know. So she's living with like his, I don't know, sister and mother and whatever, the family, where he was off doing army things. So she wrote, these endless cups of tea drunk with methodical conscientiousness in the same quantity in the same rooms, these medicinal ablutions taken with unshakable solemnity at fixed times, got on my nerves and made the whole business, whose pleasure I had never been able to understand, repellent to me.
Wow, this girl really, really hates tea.
Yeah, she hates tea. And she later wrote, I wished for nothing more intensely than to be abducted once more, but this time not by a potential husband, but by anything or anyone who would rescue me from the deadly monotony of this eternally repetitive life. So, not great. And then also her husband began physically abusing her. So they traveled to Liverpool to visit her childhood friends. But like on The Amazing Race, when two people in a relationship traveled together, it can really bring out if you're compatible or not. And they obviously were not. And then he was like transferred back to India. So then they're like, great, let's go on like a 10-month trip to Calcutta. Anyway, she's like, Calcutta, I love it. And she's just like, I love it here. This is so much better than the Irish countryside. And then he's transferred somewhere more remote. And he'd started by now maintaining a notebook where he wrote down everything she did that was like, quote, wrong. And he would like lecture her about it at the end of every day or something like that.
Ooh, they both suck, but in different ways.
Yeah. So she wrote, days become centuries when you're trapped in an unhappy marriage. And eventually, good for her, she left him. She went to stay with her mother and stepfather in Calcutta. Her mother was like, no way. Like I was going to get you this nice marriage to this 64-year-old. You didn't take it. You made your bed, lie in it. So she said, you either have to return to your husband or go back to Britain. And she chose Britain. So like just keeping track. She's now 19 years old.
She actually divorced, or did she just leave him?
Sure, well, so because her husband was still alive, so I think the like actual separation, there's something about it where it's like they were divorced, but part of the terms of divorce was that as long as either of them was still alive, neither of them could remarry.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Basically, this is going to come up because guess what? She gets married a couple more times. So yeah, so she's 19 years old, saddled with a scandal of eloping and then of a failed marriage. Her ex-husband gave her some money so she could start her new independent life. And it's like, well, what are her options here? Is she going to head back to live with his relatives? Like, no. Is she going to become like a governess? Like,
I would love her to be my governess, though.
I think that would be a really fun sort of like Mary Poppins, but not
dirtbag Mary Poppins.
Yeah. But so she's like, what am I going to do? Luckily, on the boat heading back, she met a new guy whose name is. This is where I think like we need to keep it tally. This is two. This is two for just like meeting people on boats.
Spontaneous boat husbands. We're into it.
Anyway, so she met a new guy. His name was George Lennox. He was also 19.
Hey!
Appropriate. He was the nephew of a rich and powerful English person. And so they basically just like fucked on the whole journey back to England. Everybody else who's on the ship was like, they were always together in his room. And
wonder what they were doing.
Yeah. So when they disembarked back in England, arm in arm. And then he like got a hotel and they like stayed together in the hotel, even though both of them were expected back in Scotland. So I guess that's where he was from, but they didn't go to Scotland. They just stayed in a hotel fucking. And she became a minor figure in London society. And this is where I was like, she's like a Julia Fox figure of just kind of like a scandalous, very beautiful woman who you never know what she's going to do next. And you're not quite sure why she's there or why everyone knows her name, but suddenly everyone does. Eventually, his family and friends convinced him to cut off this affair, or maybe she got bored of him. But by the end of the summer, she was single once more and had spent most of her money because she's, like everyone I've ever talked about on the podcast, terrible with money.
You're going to get one tits out lady who like has an accountant and it's going to rock our world.
That'll be, I feel, and at that point, I'll stop doing the show because like that's it. So she's just like, okay, what am I going to do? She didn't necessarily want to become like a freelance, like courtesan type. You know, she was like a romantic type person. She's very much a serial monogamist in her affairs. So she's just like, Anyway, so she wound up going to Edinburgh to go and be with her stepfather's sister, the one who ran the school. Because she's just like, well, she just kind of figures her things out. You know, it's just like vibes of like moving back in with your parents vibes where you're just like, what am I going to do?
Try that. And her mom was like, please don't. So she's like, okay, I'll try the end.
They tried the end. Yeah, exactly. So then one day she was served with a summons from her ex-husband in India, Thomas James, who was suing her for adultery. Oh, yeah. No, okay. So they weren't divorced yet. They just separated. But then the only way you could get a divorce if you were an British person at this time was if there was adultery.
And so she immediately went out and fucked a guy in a boat just to make sure.
Potentially. Yeah. So now this was her third scandal. So, so he was suing her for adultery. There's going to be a trial, etc. And she's like, I need to do something with my life. I'm going to become an actress. So she returned to London, the center of the English stage scene. And from her connections through her affair with Lennox, who had been like, you know, when she was having her Julia Fox era in London, like she still had friends there. And so she like pulled some strings to make her way on stage as an actress, or she went for acting lessons. But the acting teacher very tactfully was like, maybe you'd be better as a dancer.
No, honey, no.
But because at this point she's 21, which is too old to like start studying ballet or something like that. So she had to find something more easy to learn. Spain and Spanish culture were very much in fashion at the time. So she hired a Spanish dancing teacher and she learned from them for 4 months.
That's probably long enough, right?
Yeah, to learn one routine. And then she took a trip to Spain where she got to practice her dancing, but also just kind of like leave town during the whole like adultery trial.
Sure.
Well, in Spain, she learned some of the language and also picked up the habit of smoking tobacco and rolling her own cigarettes. And we've had several in a row women on this podcast who smoke.
I love it. I'm also going to guess this is where the name comes from.
Oh,
this cigarette era?
Hang on.
Okay.
So because she had failed to show up for her own adultery trial, the result of that was she was found guilty. Yeah. Oh, and here's where it happens. The punishment was neither she or Thomas could ever marry again as long as the other was alive, and they had to live separately. No problem.
Honestly, that sounds like a punishment for him, also for her.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were officially divorced, but she could never remarry. Because the thing, it's like, this is still like Henry VIII laws. It's like, if you want to divorce and remarry in England, you have to like get a letter from the Pope, effectively.
Not from the Pope, right?
Oh, sorry, not from the Pope, from the head of the king, I guess.
Would it have to be like King George III? Be like, hey, I want to fuck this guy on a boat. Can you imagine the number of letters that poor king must be?
Exactly. I think they would just like not even show those to him. So she went, but you very much saw it was coming. So she went to Spain, and she returned to Spain not as Eliza Gilbert, but as Maria Dolores de Porres y Montez, aka.
That's not what I thought you were gonna say.
AKA Lola Montez.
It went on for so much longer than I anticipated.
She gave herself a Catalina de Eraso length pseudonym. And so she returned. She returned, and she was Lola Montez. So part of the thing is like she had, as you've seen from the images of her, a Mediterranean complexion, one could say. She has got like dark hair, dark brows, like, I don't know if it's necessarily an olive complexion, but like, so she could potentially, if you saw the picture, be like, oh yeah, I could believe that was maybe a person from Greece or Italy or, you know.
I assumed she was Spanish when you sent me these pictures and said her name was Lola Montez. So I went with it.
Yeah, no, and she is like in these pictures wearing like a Spanish mantilla and like a veil and stuff. So she returned to, she arrived, she was now Lola Montez. Let me tell you the story of Lola Montez. It's not just a name. She comes with a backstory.
Did she make up her own like witness protection program style backstory for her? I love her. This is the moment where I'm like, no, I'm in.
Lola Montez was the proud and beautiful daughter of a noble Spanish family impoverished and exiled by a cruel civil war. She was also the widow of Don Diego Leon, who had been recently executed. She had come to England to teach singing lessons and sell Spanish veils.
This piece of shit, I love
her. And she was like, well, I don't know. I was looking at the pictures of her, and I'm just like, I'm going to put pictures on Instagram so people can see what she looks like, or just like Google Lola Montez. But she was like very striking looking. Yeah. These like pale blue eyes, the dark complexion. I was trying to think it's like if Emma Stone had black hair. Like she has these huge pale eyes. She's very beautiful is what I'm saying. She's also very charismatic and sexy. And so rich men took pity on her and helped her make connections to become a performer. Was she sleeping with these men? I mean, probably. And now we're just going to take a break for a word from our sponsors.
As a podcast network, our first priority has always been audio and the stories we're able to share with you. But at Realm, we also sell some pretty cool merch, and organizing that was made both possible and easy with Shopify. When you think about successful businesses like Aloe or Allbirds or Skims, an often overlooked secret is the business behind the business that makes selling and, for shoppers, buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. That's because nobody does selling better than Shopify. It's the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret that's definitely worth talking about is that Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%. That's more happy customers and way more sales going. If you're hoping to grow your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout we use with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/realm, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/realm to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/realm.
Hi, I'm Jennifer, a founder of the Go Kid Go Network. At Go Kid Go, putting kids first is at the heart of every show that we produce. That's why we're so excited to introduce a brand new show to our network called The Search for the Silver Lining, a fantasy adventure series about a spirited young girl named Isla who time travels to the mythical land of Camelot. Look for The Search for the Silver Lining on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
People often look at me with confusion when I ask them what their only one in the room story is. They think it has to be like mine, where I went to a 600-person event and discovered that I was the only Black person there. I know. Horrifying, right? Hi, I'm Laura Cathcart-Robbins, and I am the host and creator of the podcast Only One in the Room. Every week, my co-host Scott Slaughter and I invite you to join us for an hour and lose yourself in someone's only one story. This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt alone in a room full of people, which is to say that this podcast is for everyone.
And we're back. So she got her first dancing. I think actually, I didn't write it. Like, again, there's so many details. I can't. But she met some important guy on the boat back from Spain. And she's like, oh, I am Doña Lola Montez. My husband, Diego de Leon, was executed by the rebels. And he was some sort of rich, like, theater impresario type person. He's like, great, I'll hook you up.
Incredible.
Yeah. A lot of, like, boat-based networking going on in these days.
I also like the idea that if you need a job, you can just like fall to your knees and shout your backstory and hope that someone overhears you. Like, I'm going to try that, see if that works.
It worked for her. I have to say, you also have dark hair. So
I'm telling you, I'm one step away from being a dancing teacher who sells Spanish veils.
Yeah. So her first like real gig was, and this is kind of, I guess this was a thing that happened. It wasn't invented for her, but like during the intermission of plays, like people would come out and perform. And so she got her job as like a intermission dancer during a performance of The Barber of Seville, which is a musical that takes place in Spain. So it's sort of thematic. And her first gig was at this performance of The Barber of Seville that was being attended by the Queen's uncle and other members of the nobility. So like from zero to that is
great,
her.
Yeah.
You know what? She had 4 months of dancing lessons. She went to Spain.
Funny.
She had castanets. She's ready.
Did she actually have castanets?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. No, that was a big part of her performance. And she also, at this point, she started doing something that she would do throughout all of her travels, which was like really endear herself to the local arts critics of newspapers. So that she like won them over before they saw her perform, so that when she performed, they would be more likely to give her a good review. Was she sleeping with them? Also, maybe.
This is giving me like Ratatouille vibes somehow, and I'm like really here for it.
She is going to go to Paris at one point. So the critic of the Morning Post wrote, her figure was even more attractive than her face, lovely as the latter was, her foot and ankle almost faultless.
They say nothing about the dancing, only her ankles. Oh boy, man. Good ankles.
I'm going to say her foot does come back.
I hope so. She's a dancer.
She was, of course, not a good dancer, but so charming didn't matter. Like, in later reviews, too, were also like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. She's so lovely. She blows kisses to people. What a figure. Total smoke show. Her dancing's not great.
Apparently 4 months of dancing lessons was enough. She's like, this is all I needed to know.
Yeah, so she did her performance in front of the Queen's uncle and the nobility. Everybody loved it. The castanets. It's great. But like immediately right after, so the guy who she met on the boat was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to give her like a contract to be my like intermission dancer. But the thing is, like, if you'll recall, so she's now like 21. When she was 19, she was like the Julia Fox of London society. And then she also been involved in this like pretty notorious divorce case. So there were people there who were like, isn't that...
Hang on a minute. This striking woman with the mysterious name and the castanets.
Isn't that Eliza Gilbert?
And she went, no, I am Lola Montez.
Is
that actually?
Yeah. They were like, not only is that like Eliza Gilbert, but she was like actively born in Ireland. So the newspapers revealed her true identity and she was fired, or she lost her role being the Spanish dancer. What did she do? Like, not only did she say like, no, I am Lola Montez. She wrote a letter to the editor to be like, so do you remember the thing with Hilaria Baldwin from where she was just like, I'm totally, how you say cucumber? So this has got like big Hilaria Baldwin energy where people are like, you, Hilaria, were born in like Boston. Your name is Hillary. And she's like, but I've spent, how you say, so much time in Spain. And they're like, when were you in Spain? And she's like, I grew up there. They're like, when were you in Spain? where are you Spanish? And she's just like, I love Spain. It's very much that, but
incredible.
Anyway, so she doubled down, and this is what she does her whole life. So she wrote a letter to the editor being like, I am Spanish. I did spend some years in Bath going to school, but then I went back to Spain. I've never been in London before. I learned my broken English from an Irish nanny.
What? Honey. No.
And the newspapers, they went back and forth. They're like, she speaks English fluently. And, she also speaks Spanish barely. So then she followed that up. She showed up in person at the newspaper office to plead her case, being like, Senor, I am, how you say, Spanish.
And they're like, bruh, what do we do with this now?
So she kind of but she still had these connections with some high ranking people because she was a sexy, beautiful woman. She met German relative of Queen Victoria's, the 26-year-old Prince. Oh my God, I didn't look this up. Wait, no, it's not even his name. It's the Roman numeral. Are you good with Roman numerals? It is Prince Heinrich the 72nd.
Oh, now I take back my laughter. That's pretty high. That's so many.
Prince Heinrich LXXII.
That's so many Heinrichs.
Prince Heinrich, I think there's something about in that family you had to call every son Heinrich or something. Anyway, so he's Heinrich.
I thought the King Louis were bad, but they didn't even break 20.
So this is Prince Heinrich the 72nd of Reuss Lobenstein Ebersdorf, and he liked her a lot, enough to pay off her debts and invite her to visit him in Ebersdorf. And then someone else was like, you should also come and dance in St. Petersburg. And she was like, sounds like a cross-European tour for me. And that is what she did. So she sailed off to visit her new friend, Prince Heinrich, who I think was like, come visit me sometime, but he didn't mean right away. And he didn't mean actually.
Yeah, if you're ever in the neighborhood, stop by, we'll get coffee. And she's like, I'm actually already outside your front door.
Yeah, exactly. So she showed up, enjoyed herself at first, got quickly bored. And it's kind of like when I'm playing a tabletop board game and I'm losing, I just start fucking around. Because I'm just I'm not going to win this game. I'm just going to do things that are going to annoy everybody else because I am an asshole when I play tabletop board games and I'm losing. So she just started fucking things up because she was bored. Heinrich realized he didn't like her. In fact, she was a demon seed nightmare person. But she wasn't going anywhere because where was she going to go? So he figured the only way to get rid of her was to arrange a performance for her somewhere else, very far away from him.
That was so smart. Honestly, good for Heinrich.
Yeah. So he wrote a letter to a friend of his, the Herr Kapellmeister Karl Reisinger at the Court Theater of the King of Saxony in nearby Dresden. He's like, hey, there's this Spanish dancer. She's great. Can she come there? I recommend her personally. And he was like, sure.
How soon can she perform? Can she perform tomorrow?
So she went there. As per this era of her life, the audience didn't love her, but the critics and journalists wrote rave reviews about how beautiful she was. And then she moved on to Berlin, where she was really popular with the people, outside of her hotel. There was male admirers every morning, just desperate to be with her or whatever. She was eventually inevitably exposed as a fraud, but it kind of didn't matter. One of her fans was King Friedrich Wilhelm IV of, where are we? Saxony, I guess. This is when Germany isn't Germany. It's just all little kingdoms. And they're all led by people called Heinrich or Friedrich. Anyway, so King Friedrich Wilhelm IV's brother-in-law was Tsar Nicholas I of Russia.
Because everybody in Europe is related to everyone else in Europe.
Yeah. So, okay. My notes get unhinged as I go along. So she returned to Berlin where her first whip-based event occurred, which was this.
Go on.
I believe in one of the photos I've sent you, she is holding a whip, and that became her trademark. So there was a military parade going on in honor of the Tsar. So this is in Berlin. So King Friedrich Wilhelm is the king there. His brother-in-law is the Tsar of Russia, and the Tsar of Russia is visiting Berlin. So there's a military parade going on. And frankly, what we're seeing happening in London right now, similar to that stuff, right? Just crowds, the queue. The queue is there to see Lola Montez.
I have been following news of the queue from my apartment in Chicago with great interest.
The queue is baffling to me. But there's a similar vibe where everyone's just excited. Something is happening and like everybody's there. So Lola was among the crowd of people. So there's this military parade going on, but it was like not well planned. I guess more people showed up than they expected. Lola was riding a horse because that's people.
She's a little bit extra at any time.
Yeah, exactly. So she's on her horse. That's why she has the horsewhip, Allison, foreshadowing.
Okay.
Yeah, so she was just like, do. And then she rode into the area reserved for VIP nobility.
Yeah, she did.
Because there's kind of chaos, and she's just like,
just gonna, excuse me, gonna sneak right in here.
Exactly. So a guard came over, and when he tried to remove her, she lashed out at him with her riding whip.
Bruh, he's just doing his job.
This was a big deal. This was like, attacking a army soldier.
It's kind of like punching the Secret Service in the face, right? Like, it's not great.
When you're like, a yard away from the like leader of the free world. Right. So she got a summons at her hotel to answer the charge of assault on a soldier. When she received the summons, which is a piece of paper, she flew into a rage, ripped up the summons, and stamped on the pieces.
Like Yosemite Sam. God bless.
So then her dance does involve apparently a lot of petulant stamping. So this is maybe also what she's known by, with her beautiful feet. So then she was charged with an even more serious offense, contempt of the judicial process. But the whole thing seems to not have gone to trial, likely because the king was a fan of hers. But the story of her whipping an army guy spread across Europe. And almost all of the early prints of Lola show her holding a riding crop, which became her signature. And this is the first of more than one whip-based events that she does. So she moved on to Warsaw, which... Here's what I wrote. We won't get into it, but she was kicked out of the country.
She was kicked out of Poland?
Yeah.
The entire Poland.
Yeah. Just these things happen when you're her.
Yes.
It was something about the chief of police made a move on her and she smashed a wine bottle on his head or something like that.
If that's the case, then good for her.
Yeah. And then she continued, some of her whipping and attacks of people are whenever a man made an unwelcome pass at her, she would break things on their heads, and that would get her arrested sometimes. But honestly, I like that as a vibe. Anyway, so she continued on to St. Petersburg, performing randomly along the way. But by the time she got to St. Petersburg, her reputation from what happened in Warsaw stays in Warsaw.
But not this time.
But what happened there was too much that the Tsar wouldn't allow her to perform. So just what happened in Warsaw, leave it to your own imagination. She was kicked out, not allowed to return to Poland. Don't worry about it. So she was like, where should I go now?
Now that I'm in St. Petersburg and blacklisted by the country of Poland, what should I do?
Exactly. And then here's what she wrote. A coincidence was to resolve my doubts, as it so often happened that suddenly, without warning, totally unpredictable events turned the course of my life and drove me in a new direction, led me to a new country that a quarter hour before would never have occurred to me to visit. So what seems to have happened is she picked up a newspaper at random in a train station, and the newspaper had a list is a pun, talking about Franz Liszt.
Ooh, I give you retroactive points for the pun.
Thank you. So it was just the schedule of Franz Liszt was doing some performances, and she decided to try and meet him to advance her career.
The modern day equivalent of that would be if I picked up the New York Times and saw an article about Billie Eilish, and I was just you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to her house. Maybe she can help. Incredible.
Yeah. So Franz Liszt, there was Listomania. He was really popular.
Yeah.
In this era. So he was a Hungarian international celebrity. She attended his concert in Dresden, shot him her smoldery eyes look, and he was in.
I thought you were just going to say she shot him.
She does later start carrying a pistol, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
No,
okay. Liz is alive.
She gave him a smoldery eyes look across the... Who did that? That was one of Charles II's mistresses, was just And then he was like, I like your eyes. She proposed to him that they unite their artistic paths. And
that's going to be an unbalanced union right there.
She will stomp around to his beautiful music. He agreed, and she moved into adjoining rooms at his hotel.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
I studied Liszt in high school, and no one ever brought this drama up, and I'm so disappointed.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
Just like imagine the personal magnetism
it
required.
Incredible. For someone to just show up at your house and be like, "Hi, I want to be your partner." Franz Liszt, most famous composer in Europe, and he's just like, "Yes."
And I think there were a lot. I think he had a lot of groupies.
Yeah.
But she was not like, she was very striking looking, which is again why I sent you the pictures, because it's like, okay, like she is memorable. That's too much to her detriment. Very memorable looking. She's very beautiful, but she's like clearly got this like wild charisma that she just can convince anyone to do anything. While hanging out with Liszt, she also, this is like, it's a real Forrest Gump story of just like her meeting every famous person of the 19th century in Europe. She met Wagner, who later wrote about her as a heartless, demonic being.
Honestly, that's the response you want from Wagner. That's what you hope Wagner says about you.
Yeah. So meanwhile, Liszt wrote about her as the most perfect, the most enchanting creature I have ever known.
All right, Franz.
He promised to arrange her debut at the Paris Opera. So, like, just for scale, like the Paris Opera is like, we've got it like a corps de ballet. Like, these are people who have like trained for years, maybe decades, to like perfect the art form of like dancing performance. And Lola is just like, I studied Spanish dancing for 4 months. I'm also from Spain. Like, they're like, we can get you to perform at the intermission. So it's 1844. Paris is the cultural capital of Europe. Liszt had given her letters of introduction, and of course, everyone there loved her. The head of the Paris Opera, to his credit, was reluctant to have her perform at intermission because she was not a good dancer.
Is that what he said? Sorry, guys, she's not good. That's my.
It's a real Emperor's New Clothes moment of like, everyone, like Liszt is like, I love her. She's perfection itself. They're like, but is she?
Can she dance, Franz?
But meanwhile, she's making friends with the movers and shakers of the Bohemian artistic community. This is around when she became friends with Georges Sand, who I asked you about.
Yes.
Can you explain?
Georges Sand, a notorious pants wearer of history.
Yeah, so Georges Sand was a woman who wore pants and wrote books. That's what I know.
Yes. I didn't look this up to verify it, but I'm pretty sure that she and Chopin were an item for a long time until Chopin died of tuberculosis. But that's how I know her. I know she wrote books I have not read.
And she glimpsing, like, there's so many rabbit holes I could have gone down in this story, and I couldn't, but I do know that she's also famous for her. So anyway, apparently Lola hung out with Georges Sand wearing pants.
Hey.
Pants moment. There's no rumors about them being lovers, but I feel like everyone was lovers at that point. So like, who knows? She also became friends with Alexandre Dumas père, the author of The Three Musketeers and other famous books. And he was a very famous, like, what's the word? Bon vivant. He was just kind of like really charming. I'm trying to think of someone who's like that now. Just someone who's just like so charming and witty and fun, and like everyone just like flocks. Like how Brandon Tyler is on Twitter is like what Alexandre Dumas was like. Everyone's just like, oh, this guy's got the wit. Anyway, so he was in the midst of writing The Three Musketeers. Like, she just arrived in that moment. He was maybe her lover. Like, everyone who she met at this point, people were like, and that was her lover. And it's like, I don't know, because maybe, but she really seemed to go like serial monogamy, lover to lover. Like, I don't know if she's just like free love sleeping around. Maybe she also was. For sure, we know that she had a lover who was Alexandre Dujarrier, the owner of the newspaper with the highest circulation in France, coincidentally also the drama critic.
It's extremely convenient, Lola. Good for you.
Through their romance, Lola revitalized her career as a dancer. Oh, I don't think I said, but yeah, her performance at the Paris Opera did not go over well.
No. Alas.
Yeah, but becoming friends with the most high circulating drama critic, that worked.
It helped.
Anyway, but then later on, after the two had a quarrel over whatever, Lola doing something wild, Dujarrier attended a party and in a drunken state offended another guy who challenged him to a duel. And Lola was like, oh shit, you don't know how to shoot a gun. You're just a drama critic. She knew how to shoot a gun. Why? I'm not sure. But she had a pistol and she's like, please let me teach you how to shoot a gun. He's like, no, I can figure this out. Of course he died in the duel.
No. I'm sorry, that's not funny.
No, and this is not the only duel that's going to come up in the story. Without his support, she was no longer employable as a dancer in Paris.
Well, that does say something about the quality of the dancing, but
So she's just like, she just like, okay, so she partied, she went to various spas, she tried to find wealthy men who would pay her to dance while she figured out her next move. Eventually, she wound up in Munich. And this is where she coincides with Ludwig. So, Ludwig, this is not crucially. So, Cece's cousin friend was Ludwig II of Bavaria, the castles of Mad King Ludwig, is the grandson of this Ludwig. So, this is Ludwig the First. Okay. So, different guy, same Bavarian, laid back vibe. So, this is something else. So, when I was researching Cece, so I have this, I have it here. I have this like 1965 biography of Cece out of print, but whatever, the library had it, hooray, called The Lonely Empress. And there were these great passages about Lola Montez where I was researching Cece and I was like, oh, what if I research Lola Montez? No, you're researching Cece. And I'm like, but I'm gonna renew this book from the library because, okay, I'm going to quote from this book by Joan Haslip. Like a beautiful black raven, the notorious dancer Lola Montez had swooped down upon Munich, seizing as her prey the gullible old king. This book is so good. The Lonely Empress, it's all written like that. I was just like, I love the writing style of this.
Just like, yes.
But it goes on. Few lovely women have ever roused so much hatred and antagonism as this Irish-born adventuress, who within a few months of her arrival in Bavaria had succeeded in completely disrupting the most peaceful and conservative of countries, conquering not only the king's heart, but insisting on dictating his policy. So, Ludwig, who's like 60 years old, I think. She's, God knows, 22 or something. So he was alerted that the Spanish dancer Lola Montez was in town and would like to perform at his theater. He was coincidentally, and actually not coincidentally, probably she knew this, he was currently obsessed with Spain and Spanish and beautiful women. So he
one of those things she actually is.
He requested a private meeting with her. And so this is probably an apocryphal story, but maybe it's not. And it's a great story. And this was one of the first things I read where I was just like, I have to do this on the podcast. I owe it to the Tits Out Brigade to do the story. So apparently he invited her to meet him and she wore her like best, black velvet Spanish.
Got all her shawls out.
Put on her mantilla.
Got her castanets ready to go.
I'm sure she did. She was always with her castanets, her bullwhip, and her pistol. Oh, there's also, I don't even know when this happened in the story, but maybe this is what happened in Warsaw. She was showing how she kept a dagger hidden in her garter at all times. And people were so shocked that she like showed her leg. Maybe that's why she's kicked out of Warsaw. Anyway, she was armed at all times. Anyway, so the meeting, I won't delay. So she went to meet him in his office and he allegedly pointed right at her breasts and said, nature or art?
What a piece of shit.
Which I want to say, I'm pretty sure breast implants not invented. So I think he was asking, like, is this padding or are you actually this voluptuous?
Uh-huh.
And she strolled right up to his desk, picked up a pair of scissors, cut open her dress, and revealed her breasts to him.
A literal tits out moment.
This is where I'm like,
brigade.
I can't. This is where I'm just like, not that I wasn't already in, but this is one of the first things I read about her. And I'm like, I'm in. I can't not be in. Like, this is, yeah.
Gorgeous.
Now, this is probably not strictly true because then she would have had to have gone home with a cut open tits out dress. And
which honestly sounds like she might have done.
But someone would have written about it. Yeah. So he agreed to let her perform in Munich during the break of a play ironically titled The Enchanted Prince. He wanted to have her painted for his gallery of beauties. So he just had like the most beautiful women he met. He just had them painted and he like had a gallery of beautiful women in his house.
Sidebar, this guy is gross.
I mean, he's not. He was in love with her and she took advantage of that and began considering herself his royal mistress. Even though I don't think they'd slept together yet, but he just started giving her, she became his favorite. Like she was his favorite. And she was just like, I consider that being his royal mistress. Okay, so there's a lot of like religious-y stuff going on that I'm going to skip over because there's not room for this discussion, and I don't care to read about that because that's not interesting to me as cutting open your dress for a tits out moment. But anyway, so she was born in Ireland. But it's like Ireland during the British colonial era. So she herself was a Protestant person. Okay. But as Lola Montez, she had to pretend she was Catholic because Spanish people were Catholic.
I'm sure she did a great job of pretending to be a Catholic too. Which is like,
oh no, she like accidentally like went to Protestant services and stuff.
Pulling out her rosary, was like, "Look, I am the Catholic." How you say?
I picture her like being at a Catholic mass and everyone's saying the prayers, and she's just like pretending she knows all the words.
Bless her for committing all the way while doing no research at all.
No, yeah, she didn't need to apparently. Anyway, so she encouraged him to become a Freemason.
Yes.
And there were rumors spread that she was a secret agent of the British Foreign Secretary, which is like, you know what? I wish. No, she was not. She was the tortoise laying the eggs and just doing. She's just a random person. She had no plan.
The spy in the whole world. It's like if the Pink Panther was a spy. That's what it reminds me. It's like, absolutely not.
No. So she encouraged him to become a Freemason. Rumors spread she was a secret agent. Ludwig wrote, "I'm now like a man of 40 or even a youth of 20," because he's 60. He's like, "I'm so young. I feel 40." Which to him is young. "I'm in the grip of passion like never before. I am happy. My life has a new vitality. I'm young again. The world smiles on me." This is not true. Bavaria was not smiling on him in this situation. Like, as I described, like the raven-haired temptress swooping in. Anyway, so he just gave her like a pension and money. She began assembling her own royal court. I think she's just like, this is, she's just like failing upwards. And she's like, I was always destined for this. She also got a large black dog who she named Turk. She always had a dog with her until later she gets a different pet. But again, I'll tell you that later. Anyway, but her walking this giant black dog Turk around was like like people saw that all the time. And
love it. Only a medium racist name for a dog. All things considered.
She did also have a dog called Jip.
Well, there we go.
Yeah. Anyway, so she had the dog, but she also like was still maybe like she would still see men alone, which was like not what one did. Were they her lovers? I don't know, but I think she just didn't. She liked men more than women. She liked hanging with men. There's one guy who she wanted to visit, but he didn't come by. So then she like stormed. She like walked through town. Everyone saw her. She went to like the place where he lived. She rang every doorbell because she wasn't sure which place he lived in. So like waking up everybody there. And I think she would have broken every window of this building.
True Carrie Underwood style.
Yeah. Yes. Big. Yeah. Carrie Underwood, like keying the truck energy. So she did stuff like that. The police went to investigate her for breaking all of the windows. And she was like, that wasn't me. Someone must have impersonated me.
That was another lady wearing a Spanish shawl with castanets.
Walking with a giant dog. Ludwig amended his will to leave her with a pension as long as she never married. He also, so there's a whole thing with her citizenship, so she was pretending she was Spanish. Passports existed at this time.
Like you could check.
Yeah. But so she couldn't show her like actual, I don't know, I guess she would have been a citizen of Britain. Or maybe she had an Irish passport. Anyway, but she couldn't show those because those showed her real name and that she wasn't Spanish. So she had no papers. So he was working at getting her Bavarian citizenship. So she could be elevated to nobility. Her influence on the king, and there's been other stories, not just on the podcast, but where it's just like, oh, this woman, she's such a bad influence on the king. She was like bewitching him. It's like here, that's actually true. She actually is a bad influence on him. She is a monster person. She was extremely unpopular with the Bavarian people who
imagine.
From Cece, we know they're just like a chill, laid back people who are just like riding horses, climbing mountains. Like that's their vibe. And she's just running around. Ay. I'm from Spain, but I don't know, horse whipping people, whatever. to be continued. We're going to end there for this week. Next week, we'll have the thrilling conclusion of the saga of the Irish, English, raised in India and also in Scotland, spiritually Spanish, just this hot mess that is and was Lola Montez, including a reveal of where her grave is. Spoiler, I think a lot of you might live in the country where it is. So stay tuned for that later. Allison will be back, of course, because I can't not finish the story and have her there talking about it. So yeah, in terms of everything, this season is still just like barreling ahead, just like a train that just keeps going. So we've got several more episodes, including, of course, next week, the new Lola Montez episode. There's yet more to come, and I have an incredibly long document, and I want to make it longer, and I'm happy to make it longer, of suggestions from you, the Tits Out Brigade, of people you'd like to hear me talk about on Vulgar History. You can find that at vulgarhistory.com. There's like a button that leads you to a form. You can also send me a message on my Instagram at vulgarhistorypod, and also on Twitter at vulgarhistory. If you want to just like straight up send me an email, vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com. And you can support the podcast in all the ways. So you can, just by listening, tell a friend about it. Put a little rating or a little review wherever you're listening. Even if it's Spotify, there's a place where you can like tap for the 5 stars. You can shop the Vulgar History merch store at vulgarhistory.store. And when you're there, you can use code TITSOUT for free US shipping, or TITSOUT10 for 10% off. And if you would like to support me on Patreon, if you go to patreon.com/AnnFosterWriter, there's a really cute community growing there. I post all the episodes there usually about 5 days early for Patreon members. And then also there's things you can take part in there, like polls. And then also you can, also the episodes there are ad-free. And yeah, if you pledge at least $5 or more a month, then you get the bonus episodes, which if you just join now, you've got like a huge archive there of So This Asshole. You've got Vulgar Peace Theater. So yeah, that's what's happening on Patreon. Anyway, we will be back next week. Allison will be here as well for the thrilling conclusion of the truly unbelievable and just like unrelentingly tits out saga of Lola Montez. Until then, you know what to do, and that is to keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is hosted, written, and researched by Ann Foster and edited by Christina.
Talmor, Talmor is my home. My family have worked the land for generations. My gran says the island does not belong to us, but we belong to the island. And we must be ready, for a great evil is coming, and death follows with it.
Listen and subscribe to the latest season of Undertow, The Harrowing, a Storyglass production presented by Realm, available wherever you get your podcasts.
With your long-forgotten name, we call upon you. We call upon you. In the words of the unspeakable language, we call upon you. We call upon you. By the spilt blood of the wicked, who walk upon this world, sprouting the words of false idols, we call upon you. We call upon you. On the land of the dead harvest, that which brings the earth itself into your service, Yamal, we call upon you. We call upon you. We call upon you. We call upon you. Yamal calls upon you.
The Sprouting, a Call of Cthulhu actual play podcast by Blighthouse Studio. Find us on your podcatcher of choice.